First match of the day here for Hearthstone Grandmasters. So if you're joining us now, congratulations! You are due for a great day full of Hearthstone. Tyler and Glory is going to be our first game of the day. And as we were talking about, Gia, fairly similar lineups for the most part, but with a couple of signature changes from what we have deemed as the cookie cutter lineup from the most part, with Tyler deviating away from the Warrior and Glory chucking in there a Demon Hunter, which, for me at least, I think has been a very smart inclusion this week.
Very much so. And the standout thing from Tyler's lineup for me is the lack of Warrior in there. Whereas just a few weeks ago, we were saying Warrior is probably a must bring. Tyler was one of the first people to not even ban it away and prove that you can just get away with softening Warrior somewhat if you run weapon removal. And he yet again has Priest, but no weapon removal in it. So this time, Tyler is trying to not get a Warrior on his side, potentially targeted, but he's still banning it away from Glory.
Yeah, and then I suppose, whether you want to call it the downside, the upside for Tyler, again, he doesn't want to bring Warrior. And I guess that works fairly well against Glory because he has very much got an anti-Warrior tech in most of his decks. He's got double Ooze in the Demon Hunter, and he's got Ooze and which in a way is good for Glory because he doesn't have to face that deck. He gets to ban something else instead in the Priest. But in a way, he has a few dead cards in his lineup that he would definitely like to slot in for the more standard, powerful inclusions.
That's right. And the upside, I suppose, of Tyler not having Warrior for this matchup is offset by the fact that he has Zoo, in my opinion, because that's a deck that will really, really struggle against both this Soul Demon Hunter and the Stealth Rogue, which can really kill Zoo before they can get their Flesh Giants online sometimes.
Indeed. So to start things off, Gia, we're going right in with the Rogue on Rogue. Aggro Rogue versus Aggro Rogue. And while I've come to get to terms a little bit with the Burgle Miracle Rogue mirror, the Aggro Rogue is not one that I've been seeing all too much on ladder or in Grandmasters.
Definitely not, but I have a thinking feeling that you're going to see 2 trades maximum before one player just decides to go face, then the other says, all right, I'm going to race you or I lose. Glory on the Spy Mistress on 1 here. I would argue this is probably the only rogue matchup in history we've seen where you would rather be the rogue going first and without point just to be able to put a threat on board first. And if your opponent has to dagger down that first 3-1, you're already so far ahead. So I love that Tyler keeps the backstab here.
Backstab, I think, is absolutely bang on there. The interesting part there was the Greyheart Sage, right? Because we were just talking yesterday about how Greyheart Sage, in a slightly different deck, admittedly, in Weapon Rogue, was pretty much an auto keep. Do you think it's just too slow in the matchup? Is the reason why he's tossing it?
Could very well be. I think, yes, it's highly impacted by the fact that this is not Weapon Rogue, and you're somewhat less reliant on hitting the cycle into Self-Sharpening Sword. You can just rely on Stealth Minions hitting face as a win condition, and yeah, it does just seem that little bit too slow, especially since Tyler is going second in this matchup. But already a crossroads for Glory. If he just dagger passes, then the next turn gets kind of awkward as well because we're looking at Deadly Poison. He doesn't have an activator for Hook Scimitar till far in the future.
And therefore, is it ever Secret Passage to find a 1-drop? Like, I know that's an incredibly low value use of the card, but this dagger here is not doing it for me.
It's really not. I'm thinking if it's going to be a passage in the near future, it could be next turn. But with this attack of the dagger, preemptively from Glory, it feels like he is just going to use the second charge on Tyler's own 3-1 if it survives, and then re-dagger and go Deadly Poison into Burrowing Scarpid, which is, it's a way to spend mana, but it feels awfully slow.
It really does, and you got to remember, that using Deadly Poison on a dagger isn't necessarily worse in this matchup because you're still getting 4 extra damage out of it, right, with the 2 weapon charges. It's just whether you have time to go for the dagger hook scimitar nonsense and get all 4 charges through over the course of the game.
Yeah, doesn't seem very likely. And also the fact that beyond this turn, you'd always feel bad about sending the dagger charge into a minion because now you're overcommitting the damage, whereas Tyler's minions have usually 1 health. Can just play the Greyheart Sage and start cycling though.
Interesting. I guess I'm okay with the Greyheart Sage. I've got to say, though, I was kind of looking at just Coin Lillian there for me to get a stronger minion on board, harder minion to deal with, and the follow-up of just Sinister Strike Hooked Scimitar looked fairly strong as well.
Pretty interesting.
This does now die to the 3 attack weapon very cleanly.
I kind of like your line looking back on it. Well, Tyler has no shortage of resources, but this Burrowing Scorpid is a pain to deal with.
And so you don't deal with it? You just point everything towards the face? Like, this could be, what, Sinister Strike Hooked Scimitar, that's 11 damage altogether. 15 with the Eviscerate.
Like playing, this Spectral Delinquent with the Coin Scimitar so that he can cash in the Ash Tongue for more damage next turn. It still fits with Sinister Strike Eviscerate on 5 mana as well.
Okay, I like this line a lot because with just Eviscerate, I think he was like 2 or 3 damage off lethal if he didn't connect with a minion. So this seems very smart to me.
And now Glory knows he's pretty close to dying, could very well just be dead the next turn because he himself can act with that stealth minion either. So in terms of outs he can gain from Secret Passage, there's no taunts in the deck. There's no discovery options. There's nothing.
What you see is what you get with this deck. It's very honest, very straightforward, and he's going to have to find something a little bit more impressive. There's no Edwin in the deck even, so he can't make a huge threat on this turn. It's just Greyheart Sage, right? Try and draw through to some damage to kill his opponent.
Best he can do is set up a counter lethal, but Tyler
Yikes.
with 7 on the board, Ash Tongue for another 3 damage, 8 Sinister Strike, it is more than he could possibly ask for.
Yep, super lethal there. Very, very quick game, and I think, you know, if we want to analyze about what actually happened there, even though I take some umbrage with Tyler's line in the mid-game there, the point is really he hit the 1-drop, 2-drop, whereas Glory just hit the 1-drop. He had to go Dagger on 2, and really he had to go Dagger on 3 with just equipping the Deadly Poison. Super low tempo plays. He just didn't get what...
You love to see Tyler's mom just popping in the corner of the camera there to see, oh, okay, you won this game. See you next one.
Good job, son. Mama is proud. Maybe we'll get a dab at the end. Who knows? But yeah,
I'm so excited.
The only thing that I think that we can even talk about there from Glory, because once the game progressed, it was really pretty much over once turn 3 hit for him, was whether or not you go for the Secret Passage purely to find a 1-drop on turn 2. Which... Again, you know, it's super low value, but I think on average, with how quick that matchup is going to go, there is some real reasoning just to try and stick anything on the board to fight back.
That's a very real point because Tyler was the first one to play 2 minions on board at the same time, and because Glory could only deal with one of them in that turn with the Deadly Poison Dagger, Tyler just had all the initiative going forward. We did have some questions about Greyheart Sage versus the Infiltrator Lillian, but you can't deny that Greyheart Sage for cycle does some more powerful combos here and there. That does mean that Tyler takes the first win in the series, but I still have some worries for him overall because I think the Zoo Warlock could really be a sticking point.
It could indeed, yeah. The Rogue would have a great matchup there, obviously, with all the damage it's dealing. And, I mean, I'm still just thinking about that matchup. I feel like it's the kind of matchup I'd really like to play a whole bunch, because with literally no random generation in the deck, I feel like you could kind of maths it out most of the time and figure out, if this happens, what do you have to do? If this happens, what do you have to do? The kind of life coach approach that he wanted to take of having seen every situation before so you know what to do. Obviously, we can only see it once in this series, though, in the first game between Tyler and Glory. We're going to go to a break now to let the players get ready for the next match. But when we come back, we're going to see, as you said, if Glory can pull things back, potentially against the weak point of Zoo from Tyler. It's Tyler versus Glory in our first match of the day. And while we were just talking about the weak spot for Tyler potentially being the Zoo, depending on what it matches up against, it seems to have found the good matchup right out of the gate versus Glory, as it's going to be Zoo versus Priest, which I personally would much rather take as the Zoo than either Demon Hunter or Aggro Rogue.
Right. And this is one of those iterations where Conquest, I don't want to say Q order, but just trying to hit that one exact matter a lot. Because if Tyler can take this matchup, then suddenly the Zoo, as the potential weak point, is just out the window. And he just has so many shots with the Tempo Mage, which I think has a great shot against all three of the archetypes from Glory. However, Zoo does have its failure rate here and there. If you don't go giant pop-off turn, or if it comes just one turn too late, sometimes Priest can put together their answers.
Yes, indeed. Taking a look specifically, sorry, at Tyler's list, I've got to be honest, I think it's a bit of a confused build of the Zoo Warlock, because he's got the Soul Shearer in there, which is, you know, as we talk about, and as our producer Abar will vehemently state over and over again, is not a good card in Zoo. 2 mana, deal 3 damage is very weak at this point in Hearthstone's development. And so you really only do that to have the extra soul fragments in your deck. But Tyler doesn't really have the payoff for those soul fragments in there. He's not running the Shadowlight Scholars in there, which is, I think, for me, the main reason why those the Soul Shear came into the deck in the first place. So I'm critical of Tyler's list here, I've got to say.
What I can see as potential synergy for Soul Shear is the double Pen Flingers in there.
That's
if
fair.
you're running double Pen Flinger, it's kind of just a few that go with it outside of the Soul Shears, the Soul Fires and the Raised Dead, and of course Soul Fire has potential of discarding things that you don't actually want to discard. But I would agree that just gonna be one Soul Shear for the upside of 2 Pen Flingers, it doesn't feel like it is that consistent enough to be worth it.
Yeah, I'd much rather play another Vulture, because he's only playing one of them, for example. Maybe even just another Brittlebone Destroyer. Just anything that's like a little bit more, got a bit more kick to it in terms of locking down the board. Tyler keeping an interesting hand there, though, with Cult Neophyte and Raised Dead. It doesn't really necessarily play to either of the power spikes in the deck, as I always talk about of the Hand of Gul'dan being discarded or Dark Glare. But it does synergize fairly well in making it hard for Glory to respond to the board.
I was gonna say, if you wanted to have just Cult Neophyte into Cult Neophyte and Priest can't respond because they can't afford to, with the mana not for penance available on this turn, for example, then that is a consistent plan, but I don't feel like 3-2 plus 3-2 is enough, because eventually Priest can hit their wide AoE, and then you haven't really gone towards the win conditioning yourself to get cheap Flesh Giants. But with this expired Merchant draw with the Hand of Gul'dan, just kind of makes everything a lot easier for Tyler, doesn't it?
It does indeed. You can see from Tyler's reaction there, he was either very excited or very cold, rubbing his hands together there in his hoodie. And I suspect that it was the first one, I've got to say.
That was a bit strange. We could have seen him just immediately proc the Merchant so he could raise Dead and get back to the minions immediately, but it's not to say it's strictly wrong to damage himself. It's working towards the Flesh Giant cheapening. But I don't think Tyler was happy with how he ended up this turn, because he is just leaving the Pen Flinger face up and potentially lose out on damage later on.
Yeah, that's a good point, isn't it? It's weird that the one place I didn't want Penflinger to go on that turn was Glory's face. It had to go, you know, to either shooting Tyler's own Warlock or killing off the expired Merchant. And I mean, it works out perfectly for him.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that the Penflinger lives and the Merchant can trade away into the Karj anyway makes Tyler's life a lot easier. He can just put back the Hands of Gul'dan and then go for Nightshade Matron.
Yeah, I mean, he does need to be afraid of the Flesh Giant in hand, right? So...
Oh, true.
I mean, he could... It would be a 50-50 with Raised Dead, so it's a valid play that you could consider, but I think he can try and optimize his chances a bit more over the coming turns.
Well, there is a Flame Imp in hand, so if he wants to delay a little bit longer,
Sure.
then he can just guarantee the Flesh Giant staying in hand for the next
Well, yeah, if he doesn't want to go for the Nightshade and instead wants to go for the Expired Merchant, you can of course make it work on this turn with either the Penflinger or the Flame Imp, which looks fairly clean.
So he is going to go up to the full... Oh, sorry. That does discard 2 cards from hand, essentially, when you play the Merchant and the Skull. Thought it'll went up yesterday, I'm still not used to it. And you really don't mind if you lose an additional hand off of the Death Rattle from the Expired Merchant because he's got more than enough resources. Although, strangely, no Dark Flares.
Yeah, I mean, losing the Skull would be actively good at this point, to be honest. If it just gets it out of your hand, you really don't want those anymore. Just wants to start throwing out these cards. Because, I mean, you're right, he doesn't have the Dark Glare, which is kind of scary at this point. But just with this board and double Cult Neophyte, I think that alone should be enough to carry him through to, if not a victory, a really, really good spot. Because he can just delay Soul Mirror, make it harder to do Time Rip with other cards as well.
The Neophytes, you can, I think, in this situation, just stagger them out as 2 medium disruptions instead of 1 big disruption, because against Priest, when they go for their big AoE clears, it tends to be 1 card taking up their entire turn. This draw for Tyler is insane.
Oh my god, what do you even do here? Like, there's just too much stuff. He needs to clear cards out of his hand, but he wants to play Dark Glare, but he wants to play the Nightshade Matron as well. Maybe he can do both.
Have your cake and eat it. I think, of course, it'll depend on what comes off of this next tap, but he can just fit in the Spirit Jailer and honestly Soulfire to make room in the hand. He doesn't technically need both Neophytes if he feels that 1 board state can be enough to get him through the win. You would rather have both, obviously, so that you can delay Soul Mirror for 2.
Yeah, I mean, the only issue here is like board space, but I have to be honest, I was looking very heavily at Soulfire because it gets the Penflinger back to the hand, which means he could shoot himself in the face again and gain more mana, which means he could maybe have got down the Nightshade Matron depending on what was discarded. I'm maybe getting a bit too fancy there for sure. I mean, this is what I was talking about. This is a decent line, gets attack on the board, and gets the Neophyte in play to make things harder to respond to.
And just look at how impactful the coin expensivature, I don't know what you were calling, expensifying effect from the Cult Neophyte. Yeah, I'm learning to speak English now. Is making an effect on Glory's board. He can't play Time Rip, but he also just really wants to save the coin for Soul Mirror on the next turn. You could just see Penflinger rushed out with the broom.
Oi, oi, oi. I mean, Penflinger, coin, and then play it again? Yeah, I definitely don't like the sound of that.
Yeah.
I mean, he does need coin for Soul Mirror, but little does he know, that's very likely to not be a possibility on the following turn, because even with the Dark Glare taken care of, Tyler's got all the mana he needs to throw down just Flesh Giant Cult Neophyte if we want to get simple before he starts playing with any other nonsense, which he could do with the Raised Dead and stuff. That's just a super powerful turn on its own.
Indeed. Start with the Raised Dead, and he can potentially fit in 1 more play, but he didn't hit a 1-drop.
I really love that trade he made, though, of going for the Cult Neophyte first to maximize his chances of resurrecting another one. It's subtle, but I think, you know, the kind of thing you need to be doing to lock down this game.
And so, does he just spend his mana on tap to get down the Giant and Neophyte and just spend that extra mana? He really doesn't need any other cards. Probably are okay with just floating.
Exactly. Kind of worse in a way for him to have extra cards in hand almost. Unless, of course, he hits specifically Flesh Giant, like there's an upside potential, but then I suppose you're not making it more expensive, so you're walking into Coin Soul Mirror on the other side. It really does just have to be Neophyte this turn, I think.
Neophyte and Giant. Question of whether he wants to do well. Gonna hold back on it. Completely respect this. He is setting up lethal on the next turn and also is sitting on these Soulfires in hand.
It's a clear on the Giant on this turn, at least for Glory. He's not just going to have to tank the 8 here.
And is it Time Rip or Shadow Word Ruin? There's an argument for the Ruin because it actually doesn't hit very many targets at all.
Yeah.
The Nightshade Matrons and the other Fletch Giant are the only ones left. Glory just going to spend his mana the most efficiently though.
Tyler here racking up pretty close to lethal already, right?
2 off?
2 off. Soulshare cannot go face, sadly. Or I guess happily, that would be absurd.
So all he needs to really worry about is Soul Mirror. So as long as he positions a board state where not everything gets cleared by the Soul
Yes.
Mirror, then he's
Yes.
fine. So I was looking at Dark Lair there, and it can still come down. Penflinger.
Ooh. Penflinger, Soulfire, still 1 off, but that's probably what we're looking at over the next few turns. And then, yeah, just anything that sticks.
Yeah, he could even Soul Shear here potentially if he doesn't want to risk Soulfires starting each other this early.
Okay,
Yep.
sure. Yeah. I'm fine with this as well. This still means, I mean, he doesn't have to stick anything here, because it means if the Soul Mirror comes down, as long as Soulfire doesn't discard Soulfire, he's won the game.
Indeed. So Glory can just get the Matron and a Soul Shear online, or yeah, go for the guaranteed clear on everything but the Spirit Jailer. Prays he survives. Highly unlikely.
Yeah. 2 hands going to Tyler's hand. Pretty good as well, just to juice up the hand size a little bit more. Just trying to figure out if there's any way he can 100% this by playing other spells. And like if he goes Expired Merchant first or something, I don't think there's any way to make it super
the hands
clean.
of Gul'dan were cheaper, but I don't think it's... Wait! No way! No way!
What?
It happened!
It actually happened!
It was a full hand! Disaster! So now he has to think about clearing the Spirit Jailer because Apotheosis is going to be scary. Does it just become a Brittlebone turn now?
Oh my god.
I wonder.
I can't believe it.
Oh my god. So he could go, so what are the outs? Like he could go discard the Hand of Gul'dan to try and draw through the rest of his deck and play Flesh Giant if he wants to stick a big board on this turn.
I mean, my primary fear here from Tyler's end is just the Apotheosis potentially on the other side for more heals. So I was definitely thinking of the Brittlebone. Tyler is going to try and get down that Giant. Is there even time?
These animations!
Oh my.
Did he miss out on the...
hit the Giant.
Yeah, he missed out on playing the 1-drop as well because the animations
That
were too long.
for Glory!
Holy Nova!
How is he still in this?
He's not in this, he's just winning.
A simple spell.
Okay, well, if Tyler hits the Giant and he already does just have Dark Flare and Vulture for this turn with the Tour Guide loaded up, he can just explode onto the board. And it's not necessarily a win for Glory, who has used Soul Mirror.
So he can go Dark Glare, Vulture, Flame Imp, Tap. You know, I mean, there's outs here, right? Like if he hits Wolf Rider, that's pretty much just game because he can go Penflinger and bounce it back.
And he doesn't need to end the game this turn, honestly, because he's seen the Soul Mirror. Glory is running 1 copy of Plague of Death. This is the Highlander version. So there are things that Tyler's afraid of, but I think you can be reasonably certain that a big board will be tough for Glory to deal with anyway.
Arcane Amplifier comes down, a 3-mana 2/5 with an active downside of tapping for 4 each turn instead of 2 now.
Brittlebone on the Cobalt because it can potentially heal 5 with Apotheosis.
Yes, I mean, it's reasonable to start playing to the out of they can't have Apotheosis, but I think even then it's just the better play, yeah. Alright, it's plenty of damage represented.
Cabal Wave! Holy Smite available too. just a question of how Glory optimizes this.
So if he
His
goes
main things he wants to kill are the Dark Lair and the Vulture.
right, like Mirazond is a heavy board, but it's not defensive enough here.
I mean, just Wave is so backbreaking for Tyler here
Yeah.
because it's going to be hiding behind a taunt.
There's no broom in Tyler's list, is there? No, to break through.
Your mind is not your own.
I believe he's used the Matrons as well. Okay, what's the steal?
Dance, puppet, dance.
Okay,
Not amazing.
not the best one.
Oh, is he really gonna risk not healing here? Okay, I mean, if you know exactly what cards Tyler can possibly have left, then you can math this out.
Yeah. I mean, you're very likely to get Hand of Cooldown at this point anyway, right?
It's like whether or not there's a matron left, that's the scariest thing for Glory. And then he knows about the other Penflinger.
I mean, I think there is one. I think only one was played at the start of the game.
And so, if Tyler Captain hits it, then he can... no, not enough wait, if you could spend infinite mana with the Dark Lair, which a lot of the time you can get over 10 mana in a turn.
Right.
And there is a matron, I think there's a way to mass it out, but my gosh, is it hard to think about.
Yeah, it's not really infinite mana though, is it? It's a lot.
Oh!
Speaker Gidra?
Hello?
With Hand of Gul'dan!
But the deck is mostly soul fragments now, so Tyler would start fatiguing if he doesn't deal the lethal now. The Gidra
Do you
can't
care?
face.
Look how big that is!
But
Play that.
it's
Hand.
not lethal, right?
It's
One off?
One off?
Because he can play the Penflinger again?
Yes.
I mean, I agree with playing it so that the Gidra can get through the taunt immediately, but it's not over.
It's not over. But it's looking scary for Glory. He's got Shadow Word Ruin that can clear off some of this board, but he's still dying. That doesn't do it. He needs Zephrys. He can draw to Zephrys and hit 2 mana, which doesn't save him then even, right?
Can't hit Frost Nova with this.
Is there... There's nothing that gives lethal for 2 mana because he could only hit Eviscerate.
Wave of Apathy doesn't do it either, and this minion is too small to make Apotheosis relevant.
I'm struggling to see the outs, I've got to say.
Don't see it either. Mirazond doesn't do anything impactful
If
on
he
the board.
plays Envoy and gets a discard effect, then he could then play
Okay,
that and
Yeah.
discard hand into Zephrys clear.
that's the only, like, possible out. It's
Right.
not likely, but
It's super
every other
unlikely.
line, I don't think he has enough mana to work with.
Yeah, like, unless Mirazond Gidra, but then it just doesn't clear enough, right? Because he can't activate the spell burst. Oh no, it was summoned
The
anyway, he
Gidra
doesn't
comes
even
from,
get
yeah,
Gidra.
it doesn't work. Came from the Vulture. It's a little bit too far down.
Oh, there's the Zephrys, but no mana!
Wow, this game.
Crazy way to close things out. A very roundabout victory for Tyler, who I'm not even sure if he's won yet, looking down whatever he's doing off his computer. But yes, a crazy way for that to go out there with the Sulfide, discarding the Sulfide. I think it was absolutely the correct play for Tyler to take that out. It was just a very, very likely chance. What, like 8 out of 10, 9 out of 10 to just instantly win the game, which you take 100% in those instances. Just didn't work out for him there. But still, I think approaching it with a level head thereafter for the most part, aside from missing that one drop and realizing it wasn't over quite yet. He could still win.
I think it was 8 out of 9 to win the game
Right, okay.
immediately. Oh man, it's pretty good that Tyler did not tilt after that. I mean, there was a bit of rope towards the end there, but I can't blame him whatsoever because you do have to take a few seconds to just process what the heck just happened unless your X flies and you don't flinch for a second. Well, that will be a huge, huge win for Tyler because I was saying this zoo could potentially get swept by Glory's Demon Hunter and Aggro Rogue, but now it's taken a win, and Tyler just needs a win with his tempo mage.
Right, yeah, which is the, I mean, I'm going to say modern and accept that I'm going to get tagged about 50 times on Twitter by angry pro players. The modern build of Tempo Mage that we see here, with Spellkins in there, Wand Makers, cutting the Arcane Intellect. Still much debate about whether or not this is the correct list, with a lot of pro players, Casey being the flag bearer for that, saying the deck is good, but the cards you put in there aren't the reason why the deck is good. Like the last few cards in there, like Cobalt Spellkin, it's just not necessary. You want to play the more standard cards, like some people saying AI is worth it. A lot of people saying Conjurer's Calling is worth a spot, which I agree with on that front. But all of that aside, it's still a super powerful deck, even if it's got a rough matchup here against the Demon Hunter.
And yesterday we had some vigorous discussion about Alan's mulligan from this specific position. Not necessarily card for card, but he did have Apprentice available as a keep right off on the play, and even though it came alongside Evocation, which I think pro players on Twitter, most of them came to Orange's defense and agreement, which you do generally want to keep Apprentice. It still remains to be seen. Obviously, Alan is a player who has put in the time and the work in this deck, and his opinion, I think, has its merits as well. But Tyler is definitely a keep Apprentice gamer.
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, even though I still absolutely disagree with Alan, but I will always listen to his reasoning, and I think there's a logic behind his thinking, even if I think he's losing a few percentage points with his line. But here for Tyler already, interestingly enough, with this build of the deck, I was kind of looking at going for the Explorer there just to get a dragon, because there are 2 Arcane Breaths in the list, and activating those in this matchup can be pretty huge, actually, I find, just to give you 2 more spell discovers, 2 extra chances at the Ice Barrier primarily, but also Frostbolt, Mirror Images anyway to get some extra healing.
I'll take your 1 discovered spell from a dragon and raise you 1 extra prime to cast all of those barriers and deal with the board. I'm obviously a very optimistic mage player, but I feel like when you're in an unfavored matchup as this mage, you do have to play to these kind of crazy outs.
Yeah,
and also it's just much better on board immediately.
I do think he made the correct choice in the end, absolutely. I'm not so sure that he... Okay, I was going to say I was a bit skeptical of not going for Steward of Scrolls there, but I guess if he plays the second Solarian Prime, he wouldn't be able to get it down on turn 4. So it makes sense to just go for the lab partner for something cheap.
I was skeptical of playing the studies at all, because he could have just played the 2 Solarians and then potentially hold on to studies for, say if you expect a board clear to come down this turn, you can just hold on to all of the spell minions and then refill for a cram session off the top. Likely hold on to spells for a lackluster, but better than nothing mana cycle.
That's the reason to save it for me, yeah, is that you can pop off with a Cyclone in some way should you find it, which, hey, there you go, just as if by magic, to prove Tyler wrong, I suppose. And based on his gameplay so far, this is going to be a 1-mana 1/3 and a 2-mana 2/2 played out, potentially with a Ray of Frost thrown in there as well, just to gain a spell.
I think he can afford to hold on a little bit longer.
Okay.
It doesn't feel great to go for this, but he at least has a powerful curve play in Raz on the following turn, and hopefully by the 6-mana turn he'll have more spells to play with the Cyclone. But definitely, Glory is far ahead in the driver's seat here.
He is. He's been a little bit of a trade gamer so far, but I think with justification, this once, even though usually the first thing I say on every turn as this Demon Hunter is, can I go face? But I think, clearing off the minions here, setting up for the Soul Shard Lapidary, now is when he can start actually punching his opponent in the face.
But it comes at a cost if he just wants to say Lapidary go, you're leaving up a Raz with a spell damage minion. I think that this Raz deserves some respect.
Oh, it's rough though, right? Because he really wants to go Lapidary here to activate the skull.
Okay, well, there's a line where you just sink the 9 into the Raz. Feels awful, but looking at it in the long run, this does develop a 5/5 and clear the Raz and unlock the skull.
I can't agree with this line. I just can't. I don't care if it's right. I just can't on a philosophical level. Like, I mean, I do think it was very possibly incorrect as well, because you have the 5/5 on board. Raz does not deal with that. They need something extra to clear this off. And even if they can, on the next turn you have Coin Skull. You could even throw in a Twin Slice alongside that with the extra mana if you don't find anything good to go with it alongside from the Skull. And then you can clear off the Raz. Whereas he's just sunk so much damage into it proactively.
I'm going to disagree with you pretty hard here. I think Glory had to go for that. He was at so much lower of a health total than Tyler was that if he sunk 9 face, if your 5/5 gets frozen, Raz gets to go face for 3 plus the 2 at the end of the turn. I think he's losing the race in that situation. Over on Tyler's turn, I like that he just played the Giant, sensing the weakness from Glory. And Mana Giant, we keep talking about how it's so important in this matchup to potentially be higher health than what a Blade Dance can remove.
Poor warlock.
Well, Skull off the top will do very, very nicely to try and smooth out this little weak spot for Glory.
Poor warlock.
Ooh, Aldraki can potentially get his health in a much more comfortable position. While this Demon Hunter primarily wants to go face, I think that there are spots where you do have to try and go for a control game plan. And that is what Glory is playing towards. Whether or not it's correct remains to be seen.
Yeah, I suppose. Taking a look at his list as well, he's playing the double Glaive Bound Adept, and like one of the things I find that this Demon Hunter struggles with is if you trade too much, it's not like you'll inevitably move towards a win condition. Sometimes your win condition can just disappear because you've used up too much damage over the course of a game, because you often don't draw your entire deck before the game is out.
True.
So that's like the biggest reason here, is it's not infinite damage. It's like the old school freeze mage. You have a finite amount to work with, and you have to allocate it correctly. It's I think, a very interesting spot.
That's a good point. I will make the counter argument that there's still a niche board-based win condition in Sociologist Militia. But
Okay.
I strongly think that in that spot, leaving up the Raz, if your 5/5 gets frozen, you're losing the race. Okay. Giant can come down.
Ooh, that is a very, very big draw there.
You have the mana to do everything. Well, the Shard Shatter costs 0, so very likely he does.
Shard Shatter. I mean, just if you wanted to go for it, straight up Shard Shatter, Aldraki, Twin Slice, Blade Dance is the clear, right?
He can also go Horde Pillager instead of Aldraki.
Okay.
He has played one of each weapon, so if he definitely wants lifesteal, then going Aldraki guarantees it. And he goes for that, so you can really see where Glory's head at in this matchup is play or control.
Yeah, okay, this is all correct. He has the mana. Very, very nicely done. Drawing a card as well. Skull ready to go on the following turn. Super clean.
Militia too. Still a ton of soul fragments in the deck, so I wouldn't fault him if he just wanted to go Militia on curve instead. He just smells weakness from Tyler. Oh man, the Chrono
bit of a
Breaker,
yikes.
low-key scary. There are Cobalt spellkits in the deck.
Okay, fair.
Just how that interacts with Militia.
Glory's having none of it. He is having absolutely none of it here.
Call your bluff. Well, the freeze is pretty significant out on some board space. But yeah, he knows that this last card, aside from the one thief, is a generated spell, so unlikely that it was the one spellkin right there.
Yep. Draw a card or press the hero power. I think with Skull of Gul'dan in hand, I'd like to just press the hero power to eke out every single point of damage at this point.
Really tough to call on those minor optimizations because depending on how much damage gets left on the board, you kind of sometimes just want to push the one immediately, but that is an insane top deck for Tyler.
Oh! Even his mum's interested. Solarium Prime. The whole family joins in. Puzzle box. Mum, come watch. Come watch. Oh my god!
What's
His own face!
happening?
Oh!
What is happening?
Whoa!
He didn't heal face, but the 8/8 taunt is so huge here.
This is so illegal.
Yeah, nothing about this abides by the law whatsoever.
Go to jail, Tyler. Yeah. Yeah, what do you have to say for yourself? What do you have to say for yourself? Disgusting.
Glory's like, well, that was a Hearthstone turn. And these are cards that are not getting discounted. Okay, he can stay alive. And he can get rid of most of the taunt. 8 is forever going to be a problem.
Yeah.
But it's not 100% over.
So, Shard Shatter...
Plus the Pillager, or it maybe Hero Power Mana Feeder, just to get the
Right.
right now.
Oi, oi, oi.
Now looking at it again, maybe you do
Yeah.
just try to hit the Arrow Slicer this turn, and then Hero Power the next turn. Get through the 8/8.
Okay, I mean, he's got a little board here. He can go for Horde Pillager plus a huge attack weapon next turn. That's not a great draw for Tyler.
But this
Not
one
a terrible
is
one there.
potentially backbreaking. Apexis?
Oh, Gram Session draws 2 though, right?
It's true,
just
it's true.
take
Yeah,
that?
this turn. Yeah, the Apexis doesn't
Yeah.
set up lethal. I was thinking Glory doesn't have Eldraki anymore, but even if 15 meets face, if Glory can somehow remove it, it won't be enough. But Evocation!
Yep, let's cram again.
Uh-huh. This is some god tier procrastination that Tyler's doing. He did just save all of the good stuff till the very last minute, but it looks like he's gonna pass with flying colors.
Oh my god. Disgusting.
Time runs out on me.
I suppose one upside of working remotely is that if you do retch on broadcast, I will not smell it, Derek.
As opposed to usual? Like... Oh man, just think.
What?
Tyler's mum there,
Okay,
just so
second-
blissfully ignorant of the son that
if he
she's
gets
raised.
The other Blade Dance off of this Chaos Strike. There's
Okay,
hope?
okay.
Kane?
Ooh,
Wait.
ooh, ooh, ooh. How much damage is that?
Not enough.
7, 9, 11, 13. It's lethal.
Is it? Wait.
That's lethal!
Oh!
That's exact lethal, right? With the hero power!
Oh my god, I forgot about the hero power, you're right!
Ooh,
Kane was the out!
ooh.
Never mind!
Kane was
Tyler
exactly
failed.
lethal! What?
Yes. Never in a million years did I see that coming.
Oh my god. Kane for perfect lethal, perfect mana utilization. I don't know who to feel more disgusted at this game. How is there no reaction? Give us something, Glory. Do you have any idea what you just did?
I think it's pretty clear that you do end up feeling more disgusted about Tyler's outcome.
I mean, yes, obviously.
twice
But
in a row. Yeah.
it was disgusting for sure.
That
Oh.
end game went nowhere near how I expected it to, but we do have to reflect on whether the ability for Glory to sustain that long was off the back of clearing that Ross.
Right.
Again, I'm gonna die on this hill. I think he was meant to clear it, and I lapidary line to unlock the skull. Now that you've had a chance to see how the game panned out in its entirety, do you have a change of opinion?
I mean, I still think I'm right here because if the Raz is left up, and even if he freezes the 5/5 on that turn, you have Skull to try and find an answer. And even if that doesn't get there, you still have the Marrow Slicer plus a Twin Slice in hand that could have been used with the coin alongside the skull to clear it off. You tank a little bit of extra damage, but there's a real chance that you can just push everything to the face if you get like a Blade Dance next turn to sweep up everything on the board instead.
Okay, agree to disagree then, Derek. We are just in the fourth game of the series, or rather heading into it, and we've already had so many disagreements. It's going to be a fun day here for sure. For Glory, with the Priest and the Rogue lined up against that Tempo Mage, these do both feel like relatively close matchups. Tyler's list is not running the Arcane Missiles, which makes a big difference against Stealth Rogue. It does, however, have the double Violet Spellwings.
Yeah, double Violet Spellwing at the start. It's kind of weird how it interacts, though, because the Arcane Missiles, you really want, like, turn 1 or turn 2. Any later than that, specifically against Aggro Rogue, I think, and they get a bit more questionable. And obviously, if you play Spellwing on 1 and they play a Stealth minion, you can't kill it off. It just has to hit face, or you can ping it yourself, which feels very counterintuitive. There are ways you can make it work. You know, if they play the Ash Tongue Slayer or something, then you can sacrifice it in. But for the most part, you know, you really wish that you were just hard running Arcane Missiles in this deck if you knew you were up against the Aggro Rogue.
Yeah, the other card that gets cut, often to make room for the Arcane Breath, is the Devolving Missiles. Actually, that type of missiles is also pretty good against Stealth Rogue, even if it just removes 2 damage from the board. If you can get it down for free with Apprentice, you're just going to take that for tempo. Mage is definitely not trying to eke out the most value in this matchup. They just want to get ahead on board and stay ahead. And this is the type of hand that can do that.
I love the full mulligan away from Glory as well. Even backstab in a very heavy tempo matchup such as this one, it's just not as good as a 1-drop. It's the only thing you care about here. You don't care which one, but you got to stick something on the board.
Already, having failed to hit that 1-drop, miles behind, but with the Akama Greyheart Sage, over a couple turns, Glory can put together some value, but will Tyler have pulled too far ahead by then?
Let's see, he's got himself a premium starting hand here, undeniably. Whoa, even the Violet Spellwing is probably not coming down here. It's probably like 2-drop this turn, and then other 2-drop plus the Spellwing next turn, and then you make a 5/5 with Shenvala is what I'm looking at right now.
Very possibly.
You don't pick the ones.
A good one.
Okay.
Insane with Shenvala.
Indeed.
Okay, so Burrowing Scorpid is my first instinct here, but it is super scary since there's a Spellwing that you know is going to give Arcane Missiles.
Yeah, I mean, then you go down the line of, do we want to leave this Akama stealth? But I think, you know, you've got to start hitting your opponent. This is Aggro Rogue. You have to deal the damage.
It's true.
Is it golden?
Tyler, give himself the best shot of dealing with the 5/2. He goes 2 plus Arcane Breath onto the Akama and then Coin Missiles, which happens to work out perfectly with his Shenvala, and he picks up an evocation for his trouble. Looking very, very difficult before he comes back to this one. But sometimes the missiles do miss.
Yeah, you trade, you take the 50-50 here to see if it clears. And you're very sad with the outcome.
Okay.
I mean, that's the second best outcome if you want to look at it optimistically.
True.
After straight up clearing.
And now for Glory, we can see Greyheart Sage plus Ash Tongue Slayer and send it all face. I mean, he just has to right. If you send it all face, Tyler goes down to 19. You have Hooked Scimitar for another 8 damage. It's just not fast enough, I think.
Trade
He
like
puts together the damage with the double scimitars. The other line is like you trade into the 5/5. Unlikely that Shenvala goes off again this turn.
Yeah, I'm shifting patterns. I like the trade here. It's really just what you trade into that gets kind of tough, because if he doesn't have any way to deal with this 5/2 organically, then it's really, really powerful because the 5/5 has to trade into it.
Rain freeze. I guess it's a question of whether it's even worth ripping those here.
It's pretty good to have against stealth minions, isn't it? Just to be able to attack into them.
But the problem is, doesn't
What to
rip it,
do?
then
What
the rest
to
of the turn
do?
is just ping, and none of these minions benefit Tyler for being pinged.
I mean, I'm almost wondering if it's just an evocation turn to try and find like a ray of frost, another brain freeze, just to clear this board completely.
I think I would have just played the missiles and then used it to trade something a little bit smaller, save more health on the 5/5. This line does guarantee that Glory ends up with a 1/1.
Well, this seems like a pretty clear line now. We are attacking Tyler in the face, absolutely here.
The rogue damage does stack up pretty quickly. Oh, thinking about the trade. Yeah.
Oh! Is that really worth trading there when he has like a 3-1 that can trade if he has to on the following
that one
turn?
felt sketchy, I have to say. I mean, from Glory's perspective, obviously he didn't have guaranteed lethal setup with this hand. The double is extremely slow if you want to eke out the full 16 damage 4 turns. But the fact that he has secret pass, pull those eviscerate.
Yeah. Okay. Trying to find something to do. Yeah, that's just a good set of 3 cards, straight up. I would not be too sad at just seeing those all come down here.
Uh-huh.
A cruel fate
I
awaits you
think
in the
you're
ashes.
fine giving up the eviscerate here for more minion development.
I mean, it's super weak to Raz, I suppose, would be the thinking.
Oh,
Like
that's
you're
true.
almost just conceding at that point if you're all in on that plan. But I agree. I think I was just like, you're in a bad spot if that happens anyway, right?
Well, he is just looking at another 8 damage from hand next turn. Worst comes to worst, you can Scorpid face at some point for another 2
yes.
damage. So the preemptive Evis face is unlocking Sinister Strike as a guaranteed lethal out, even if this entire board gets dealt with.
There's the ice barrier, though. That is what Tyler needed. As to how he approaches the rest of this turn, that's a little more complicated. Obviously wanting to get Giant down, so just... Breath and Ping?
Yeah, I think that is fine. As long as he sets up the Giant, he is threatening counter lethal over 2 turns.
Right.
Time runs out on me.
Oh, it says explode!
Right, this seems smart. Oh.
Okay, so with this trade, trade with the face, it sets up very likely counter lethal this turn because he has Magic Trick and Wand Maker to potentially just find him extra damage. Glory to trade at least a little bit. But the Sap top deck can't be underestimated.
It's so big here, being able to... I mean, you don't care that you've given them a 0-mana 8/8. It's only about trying to buy you that time to allow you to go face. Like, Sap and... what? Lillian?
Yeah,
Plus
Lillian
Eviscerate, maybe?
and the Hooked Scimitar both kind of function as cards that get down ASAP. For them to get full value, they need 2 turns. But the Lillian doesn't guaranteed go face with both halves. So I'm leaning towards Hooked Scimitar.
Is there any world in which you don't play the Sap pick? Because if you go Backstab, trade one of the 1/1s into the Spellkin, and then Burrowing Scorpid, then you have 9 damage on board, and then Eviscerate Hooked Scimitar next turn. Gives you 17. It almost works. Almost.
Sounds very sketchy.
Yeah.
Okay, this line from Glory allows him to get down the 5/2 now, which has a decent chance of going face. I kind of like it. Then he can just spend 9 mana on the rest of the cards.
Oh, combustion allows him to
Combustion.
deal with the 5-2 Scorpion. That's huge.
It's potentially game ending
Yeah.
because he just gets
You
down the
don't
giant
pick the
alongside it.
Oh my god.
And the
that's
one maker.
disgusting. Oh.
You don't even need to do like you can simply ping the 1/1, combust
Yeah.
the other 1/1, play the giant, be home free. Just give yourself the most chances to find lethal with evocation if Glory somehow even removes this board.
Was there any way to position better against combustion?
Not with a 3/5 on board, right?
Yeah, no. Yeah, with 4 minions, there's no way.
Game.
That is just game. Lillian, eviscerate your own Lillian doesn't do anything. Yeah, nothing.
So many options.
And that was very, very cleanly played by Tyler, you have to say. Even if he hadn't hit the ice barrier, well, of course, Glory would have sent everything face, so that was a very, very fortunate outcome. But Tyler was ahead on board nearly the entire match there, and it just goes to show the difference of when you don't hit the one drop as Rogue, and that's why Glory's aggressive mulligan for it is super justified.
Yeah, I definitely agree with the starting few turns for Glory. It's like, it's the end game where things get complicated, right? Like his decision to trade into a, the 5-2 that was left on board off of Shenvala that was a bit sketch. Even at the end, like I think my line of not going for sap ended up 1 damage off lethal with the way it shook out, and also meant that he was potentially dead to a bunch of generated spells on the other half. It's cool to think back on this aggro rogue. I really like that it's one of the decks where you can look at all points along the way and say, there's no generation in this deck. You have what you have, and you can maths out your only chances of winning the game, whether or not you can get there in the end. But it does mean that Tyler is the victor here, going up to 1-1, joining Glory at a 1-1 record overall.
Yep. Towards the end game there, I do agree that the trade on the 5-2 was sketchy, but if we're thinking about Glory's decision to leave Tyler 1 off lethal to set up his own lethal if he thinks a 5-2 can stick, I think it's more reasonable to think the 5-2 stealth sticks because they do need to hit like prime or something like combustion or second missiles to deal with it versus like any damage at all from just the regular deck. It's close. There's plenty of lines to be spotted
Yeah.
here, and it's something that can easily be underestimated because this is such an aggressive deck. But I like that even in these aggro matchups, it's very decision dense, and not all of it is only had by the priest.
Yeah, and I think it's very, very well played overall by Tyler, especially on the mage, employing that high tempo strategy where you just get your giants down as soon as possible, start threatening your opponent with the backswing lethal coming up very, very soon. So very well done there. Unfortunately for Glory, doesn't take the win, but he's already going into the World Championships. There's not as much on the line for him as there is for Tyler trying to book his spot there. But now